Hello, welcome back to episode 4 of the Uncanny Oddities. Tonight we're talking about Electric Universe. Is our reality a hologram? So, to go ahead and get started, I'm going to share this web article that I found. Yes, right here. We're going to share this. Hello, James. Good to see you. Thank you for coming to hang out with us tonight. Tonight, I'm going to dig into the electric universe theory and some stuff that the CIA spent billions of dollars on trying to research. So, we're going to see what they came up with. So, let's see. Yes. So, this is an article from Popular Mechanics that's basically giving us a brief overview of what they discovered. And then after that, I actually have the 29-page CIA document. And I know 29 is a lot of pages, but I'm going to try to read sections of it so that it doesn't get too boring. But I would like to dig through that a little bit after we go over the synopsis. So basically, declassified documents show that throughout the latter half of the 20th century, the CIA had some interesting ideas on how to obtain intelligence. One of the most dizzying reports comes from a 1983 document detailing the Gateway experience, or various means of altering the mind to create a kind of psychic spycraft. And that is the article that I've got pulled up over here in another tab that we're going to be sharing here in a minute. Although the document details some well known techniques such as hypnosis and transcendental meditation, ver- the document also veers into some unconventional territory and makes lofty claims about consciousness and the universe. I'll go ahead and tell you, it suggests that our very consciousness is nothing more than an electrical vibration vibrating at a frequency that is high enough and fast enough that it creates our very physical body. So there's some interesting stuff to get into here. Even if you don't believe that it's true, it's at the very least some interesting science fiction, even if you don't believe it's true. So, if you spend any amount of time pursuing declassified Central Intelligence Agency materials, you do come across some pretty wacky stuff. There are dragonfly robots, bird robots. They didn't put that here, but I would like to add that because everyone thinks that you're crazy if you say that birds or drones or robots, but they actually even have them in the Smithsonian Museum and they tell you exactly how they work. So I don't know why people still don't believe them. We're not saying that all birds are robots, we're just saying that some birds are robots. But, anyways, so that's not what we're here to talk about tonight. Cyborg cats, such as Operation Acoustic Kitty, they put a microphone into a cat and then spent literally billions of dollars putting a microphone into the ear of a cat. And then they released the cat and it immediately got hit by a car. All that money got wasted. Look it up. It's called Operation Acoustic Kitty. It's a very fun one. They wanted to spy on a foreign embassy. So yeah, some interesting stuff. But yeah. So let's go ahead and skip past some of that. So the declassified document itself isn't new. It was originally drafted in 1983. Yes, it's definitely evil. Definitely. The it was declassified in 2003. The agency is well known for its investigations into the inner workings of the human mind and how it can be manipulated for extracting information. The most famous of these investigations was the 20-year-long MK Ultra top secret project, which started back in the 1950s, where they would lace people with LSD and other drugs without their knowledge or nor their consent, and they would even use U.S. Army soldiers in their experiments. There was a lot going on with that. They even used their own scientists and soldiers in the experiments for that. Um, The document was written by U.S. Lieutenant Army Colonel Wayne M. McDonnell and explores a number of varying means of mind alteration, which McDonnell refers to collectively as the gateway experience. So, yeah, I'll have what he's having, they say. Um, Basically, what it is it's a training system designed to bring enhanced strength, focus, and coherence to the amplitude of brainwave output between the left and right hemispheres so as to alter consciousness, moving it outside the physical sphere so as to ultimately escape even the restrictions of space and time. The participant then gains to the various levels of intuitive knowledge which the universe offers. So I know that's a bit of a word salad right there. So let me try to simplify it down a little bit more on my own. So basically, what they're saying is the concept of the electric universe is basically trying to tell us that once you get to a high enough level of spiritual consciousness and learn enough about spirituality and science, your left hemisphere of your brain is the one that processes logic and, thinking, your cognitive abilities. The right side of your brain will accept pretty much anything that you throw at it. That's how people are able to do mind control during hypnosis, because basically what hypnosis does is it shuts down the left side of your brain so that only the right side is receiving input, which means that you don't think about it logically. It doesn't get filtered through the logic side, and it goes straight into your brain, and you do whatever they say. For example, cluck like a chicken. And that's basically what they're trying to say there. So let's scroll down a little bit more. And this right here says in her series of TikTok videos, someone named Holocomb zeroes in on page 19, which states how consciousness is timeless and it exists outside of space and time. It seemingly has no beginning nor end, which, if true, hmm, almost sounds vaguely like the concept of God, in my personal opinion. Read the book Helter Skelter about Mansion Family. He used the same mind control technique, and that's what's going on with everybody. Interesting. I really do enjoy learning about how the human mind works. I watch a lot of psychology videos when I have the time. So next up is, I'm gonna stop sharing this. I've got that 29-page document that they mentioned right there. Surprise, surprise, I found it. So I'm gonna read a little bit, and I'm gonna skip around a little bit because I don't want to get too boring. But this has some very interesting stuff in it. So this is to the commander of U.S. Army Operational Group in Fort Meade. All right, so let's skip around a little bit and see what we can dig up here. 1. You tasked me to provide an assessment of the gateway experience in terms of its mechanics and ultimate practicality. Hold on, let's get a voice for this one. As I set out to fulfill that tasking, it soon became clear that in order to assess the validity and practicality of the process, I needed to do enough supporting research and analysis to fully understand how and why the process works. Frankly, sir, that proved to be an extremely involved and difficult business. Initially, based on conversations with a physician who took the gateway training with me, I had recourse to the biomedical models developed by Itshek Bentov to obtain information concerning the physical aspects of the process. All right, let's skip ahead a little bit. Let's skip down to 3. Niels Bohr, the renowned physicist, once responded to his son's complaints about the obtuse nature of certain concepts in physics by saying, "You are not thinking, you are merely being logical. The physics of altered human consciousness deals with some conceptualization, Some conceptualizations that are not easily grasped or visualized exclusively in the context of ordinary left brain linear thinking. So, to borrow Dr. Bohr's mode of expression, parts of this paper will require not only logic, but a touch of right brain intuitive insight to achieve a complete, comfortable grasp of the concepts involved. Nevertheless, once that is done, I am confident that their construction and application will stand up to the test of rational critique. Now, I'm going to read some more into this because I find this super interesting, but I also don't want to bore anyone watching. So that's why I'm trying to skip around a little bit. So let's see what it says a little bit further down. So let's go ahead and start with the introduction. In order to describe the Monroe Institute technique for achieving altered states of consciousness, the gateway experience, involving brain hemisphere synchronization, or hemisync, as many of you may have heard about, the most effective way to begin is to briefly profile the basic mechanics which underlay operation of related methods such as hypnosis, transcendental meditation, and biofeedback. It is easiest to effectively describe what gateway is by beginning with a short description of those associated techniques that share some common aspects with the gateway experience, but which are nevertheless different. In this way, we can develop a frame of reference at the outset which will provide useful concepts to explain and understand gateway by comparison as we proceed. Now, I briefly mentioned hypnosis a minute ago, so I'm going to skip past this one. Well, not entirely. I got to read some of it. Let me find some interesting sections. Okay, let's read this part right here. So, okay, let's start from the beginning. According to the theories of psychologist Ronald Stone and the biomedical engineering models of Itzhak Bentov, hypnosis is basically a technique which permits acquisition of direct access to the sensory motor cortex and pleasure centers. And I know this is a lot, but this is exactly what I find so interesting. But I'm sorry. I'm ranting. I'm excited, okay? I apologize. I'm excited for this one. Um, this is the kind of stuff that I love to talk about, but nobody's ever interested. But now I finally get to talk about it. Thank you. Thank you all. And lower cerebral, emotional portions, and associated with pleasure centers of the right side of the human brain following successful disengagement of the stimulus screening function of the left hemisphere of the brain. The left, the left hemisphere of the brain is the self cognitive, verbal, and linear reasoning component of the mind. It fulfills the function of screening incoming stimuli by categorizing, assessing, and assigning meaning prior to allowing passage to the right hemisphere of the mind. The right hemisphere, which functions as the non critical, holistic, nonverbal, and pattern oriented component of the brain, appears to accept what the left hemisphere passes to it without question. So basically, what this means, I'm going to skip past the rest of that because that is a big stew of dirt. So I'm going to try to summarize the rest of this in my own words. Basically, what they're trying to say is, as I was saying a minute ago, but I think I may have said it backwards a minute ago. The left side of the brain is where all our logic gets processed. The right side is like the pattern recognition and the emotional side of our brain, which means that if someone was able to temporarily disable or shut down the left side of our brain, we could try to get it back to the right side of our brain. Thank you for the advice, James. I will try to keep that in mind. So, when we get the right side of our brain, if the left side is shut down, the left side doesn't process the logic of what is being put into our brain, so we just accept it as it is for what it is. And that's basically what they're trying to say here. And then they talk about transcendental meditation, which I'm sure a lot of people already know about that. And here's our brain, the homunculus in figure A. Okay. The motor and sensory cortex and third and lateral ventricles. So give people a second to look at that. All right. So next off, let's get into the idea of biofeedback. The third consciousness altering methodology, which will be briefly described, is biofeedback. It is somewhat unique in that it actually employs the self-cognitive powers of the left hemisphere to gain access to such areas of the right brain as the lower cerebral, motor, and sensory cortices and assorted pain or pleasure centers, instead of suppressing the left hemisphere as is done in hypnosis, or largely bypassing and ignoring it as is done in transcendental meditation. Biofeedback teaches the left hemisphere first to visualize the desired result and then to recognize the feelings associated with the experience of successful right hemisphere access to the specific lower cerebral cortex, pain or pleasure or other areas in the manner needed to produce the desired result. Basically, what they're saying, this is the science behind the law of attraction. That's why I personally find this to be so stimulating intellectually and so arguably important for people to understand, is because if you can understand this, you can understand the science behind the law of attraction, which will be able to help you use it in much better ways. So let's skip ahead a little bit more. Gateway and hemisync. This is one of the interesting parts. So now that we have briefly profiled the basic mechanics of the principal techniques for altering or expanding consciousness, which share some of the objectives and/or methods employed in the gateway experience, we may proceed to focus on what that technique actually involves. Fundamentally, the gateway experience is a training system designed to bring enhanced strength, focus, and coherence to the amplitude and frequency of brainwave output between the left and right hemispheres so as to alter consciousness, moving it outside the physical sphere so as to ultimately escape even the restrictions of time and space. The participant then gains access to the various levels of intuitive knowledge which the universe offers. What differentiates the gateway experience from forms of meditation is its use of the hemisync technique, which is defined in a monograph by Monroe Institute trainer Melissa Yeager as a state of consciousness defined when the EEG patterns of both hemispheres are simultaneously equal in amplitude and frequency. So that's why they call it hemisync, because you basically use audio to get the left and right side of your brain into perfect synchronization and harmony. The yin and the yang, up and down, as above, so below. A lot of this stuff starts to make sense once you understand this. A lot of these old sayings start to make a lot more sense. Then we got lamp versus laser. Not going to bother with that. Frequency following response. This is a good one. To achieve synchronization of brain hemispheres, the hemisync technique takes advantage of a phenomenon known as the frequency following response, which means that if a subject hears a sound produced at a frequency which emulates one of those associated with the operation of the human brain, the brain will try to mimic the same frequency pattern by adjusting its brainwave output. Therefore, if the subject is in a fully awake state but hears sound frequencies which approximates brainwave output at the theta level, the subject's brain will endeavor to alter its brainwave pattern from the normal beta to the theta level. Since the theta level is associated with sleep, the subject concerned may progress from a fully awake to a sleep state, provided that he does not consciously resist, as the brain strives to entertain its wave frequency output with the one which the person hears. Since these brainwave frequencies are outside the spectrum of sounds which can be heard in pure form by the human ear, hemisync must produce them based on another phenomenon known as the brain's capacity for deducing beat frequencies. If the human brain is exposed to one frequency in the left ear, which is 10 hertz below another audible frequency played in the right ear, rather than hearing either of the two audible frequencies, you would hear both frequencies. You would hear the difference between them, which is known as the beat frequencies, which means that because of this FFR phenomenon and using the technique of beat frequencies, the gateway system uses a hemisync and other audio techniques. Employing this to introduce a variety of frequencies which are played at a virtually subliminal, marginally audible level. The objective is to relax the left hemisphere of the brain, place the physical body in a virtual sleep state, and bring the left and right hemispheres into coherence under conditions designed to promote the production of ever higher amplitude and frequency of brainwave output. Audible and perhaps subliminal suggestions by Bob Monroe Company accompany the various brainwave frequencies, which are sometimes rolled in together with other sounds, such as sea surf, to mask the sound frequencies where desirable. In this way, Gateway endeavors to provide the subject with tools by which he may alter his consciousness based on his own volition over time through the repetitive use of the tapes so as to access, via intuitive means, new categories of information not available to ordinary consciousness. So I find this interesting, but I understand that other people don't. Um, But this is a very good document to read, but I think I'm going to go ahead and end it here. You've basically got the idea, I believe. Our entire universe is created as a hologram by our brain, is essentially the point here. Thank you for joining me tonight, and I bid you adieu.